She wasn't supposed to be here. Not anymore. Not after the way they ended it. 3 months earlier, Nyla Vance was just another name buried in a list of interns, the kind of name managers forgot 5 minutes after introductions. She sat at the far end of the office, quiet, observant, careful not to take up too much space. People passed her desk every day without looking twice, without realizing she was paying attention to everything. And then one morning, without warning, she was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, no trace left behind except an empty chair and a deactivated login. Most people didn't even notice. But the few who did assumed the same thing everyone always assumes. She wasn't good enough. She couldn't keep up. She didn't belong. And for a while, that story held. Until the day the glass doors opened again, and Nyla Vance walked back in like she owned the place, carrying something no one in that building was prepared to face. 3 months later, the same people who ignored her couldn't look away. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, eyes followed her across the room, and a tension settled in the air that no one could explain. She wasn't dressed like an intern anymore, and she wasn't moving like one either. There was no hesitation in her steps, no uncertainty in her expression. She walked straight past reception, past security, past every silent stare, and into a room she was never supposed to enter again. And that's when everything started to fall apart. Because Nyla didn't come back for closure. She came back with proof. Proof that something inside Rexwell Dynamics had been hidden for years. Proof that the people in charge had built their power on something fragile. And proof that one person they overlooked had seen it all. Who was Nyla Vance, really? How did someone with no power, no connections, and no voice manage to uncover something that experienced executives had kept buried for years? And why did her sudden return send shockwaves through a company that had always seemed untouchable? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because this story isn't just about a company or an intern. It's about what happens when silence breaks, when truth surfaces at the worst possible moment, and when the person everyone dismissed turns out to be the one holding everything together. Nyla Vance grew up in a place where opportunities didn't come easily. A small town outside Baton Rouge where people worked hard just to stay afloat, where dreams were often postponed in favor of survival. Her mother worked double shifts at a care facility, her father gone before she could remember his voice. From an early age, Nyla understood that if she wanted something different, she would have to build it herself. She excelled in school, not because it was easy, but because she treated it like a way out. Late nights, early mornings, scholarships, part-time jobs, anything that moved her forward. By the time she graduated college, she had something most people around her never got. A chance. That chance came in the form of an internship at Rexwell Dynamics, a fast-growing consulting firm known for its aggressive deals and powerful clients. For Nyla, it felt like stepping into another world. The building alone was enough to remind her how far she had come. Glass walls, polished floors, conversations filled with numbers she had never heard before. It was intimidating, but it was also everything she had worked for. On her first day, she arrived early, dressed carefully, rehearsing every introduction in her head. She wanted to make a good impression. She needed to. Because internships like this weren't just temporary positions. They were auditions for something bigger. At first, everything seemed normal. She was given small tasks, data entry, research, organizing reports. Nothing exciting, nothing that stood out. But Nyla didn't complain. She did the work, stayed late when she had to, asked questions when she could. Still, something felt off. Not immediately, not in a way she could explain, but enough to make her pay closer attention. Emails that didn't quite match the files they referenced. Numbers that shifted slightly depending on who was presenting them. Conversations that stopped when she entered the room. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't something you could point to and say this is wrong. But it was there. Her supervisor, Leland Crow, was a man who understood control. He spoke calmly, never raised his voice, and always seemed to know more than he said. To most people, he came across as professional, even approachable. But with Nyla, there was a distance that never closed. He watched her more closely than the others, corrected her more often, reminded her, in subtle ways, of her place. At first, she thought she was imagining it. That maybe she was just trying too hard. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it grew stronger. And the more she noticed, the harder it became to ignore. It started with a file she wasn't supposed to see. A misrouted email that landed in her inbox late one evening when most of the office had already gone home. Attached was a spreadsheet, dense, complicated, filled with transaction records that didn't align with the reports she had been organizing all week. At first, she assumed it was a mistake. But curiosity got the better of her. She opened it, scanned through the numbers, cross-referenced what she could. And that's when she realized something wasn't adding up. Payments were being redirected through accounts that weren't listed anywhere in the official documentation. Small amounts at first, barely noticeable. But consistent. Repeated. Intentional. Most people would have closed the file and moved on. Told themselves it wasn't their responsibility. But Nyla didn't. She saved a copy. Then another. Over the next few days, she started paying closer attention to everything. Every report, every email, every conversation she could overhear. Patterns began to emerge. Accounts that appeared briefly and then disappeared. Contracts that changed without explanation. Numbers that were adjusted just enough to avoid detection. It wasn't random. It was organized. And the deeper she looked, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a mistake. It was something bigger. Something planned. Weeks passed, and Nyla's quiet observations turned into a private investigation. She kept everything to herself, storing files on a personal drive, documenting inconsistencies, building a record of what she was seeing. She knew the risk. She knew that if anyone found out, it wouldn't end well for her. But she couldn't stop. Because once you see something like that, once you realize what's really happening, pretending you don't know becomes impossible. And Nyla had spent her whole life refusing to look away from hard truths. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a late afternoon meeting, one she wasn't supposed to attend but had been asked to prepare materials for. As she stood near the back of the room, listening, she heard something that confirmed her worst suspicion. A client questioned a discrepancy in their accounts, something small but noticeable. Leland answered smoothly, deflecting, redirecting, offering an explanation that sounded convincing. But Nyla knew it wasn't true. She had seen the numbers. She had the files. And in that moment, she understood exactly what she was dealing with. After that, things moved quickly. Too quickly. Access to certain files was suddenly restricted. Tasks she used to handle were reassigned. Conversations grew shorter, colder. And then, one morning, she was called into a meeting with HR. The conversation was brief, polite, final. They said the internship wasn't the right fit. That they appreciated her effort, but it was time to move on. No specifics. No discussion. Just an ending, delivered with a smile that didn't reach their eyes. Within an hour, her access was gone. By the end of the day, her desk was cleared. For a while, it worked. Nyla disappeared from their world just as they intended. No calls returned, no references given, no opportunities offered. It was as if her time at Rexwell had been erased. But what they didn't realize was that she hadn't left empty-handed. Every file she had saved, every record she had documented, every inconsistency she had tracked, it all stayed with her. And in the silence that followed, she had time to think. Time to understand what she had uncovered. And time to decide what she was going to do next. She didn't rush. She didn't act out of anger. Instead, she organized everything. Carefully. Methodically. She cross-checked her findings, filled in gaps, connected details that hadn't made sense before. What started as a collection of suspicious files turned into something much larger. A pattern of financial manipulation that stretched across multiple accounts and multiple clients. It wasn't just one person. It wasn't just one department. It was embedded in the structure of the company itself. And the more complete the picture became, the more dangerous it was. Nyla knew she couldn't do this alone. So she reached out quietly, cautiously, to someone who could help. A legal advisor with experience in corporate fraud cases, someone who understood how systems like this worked and how to expose them without losing everything in the process. It wasn't an easy conversation. Trust doesn't come quickly when you're dealing with something this serious. But eventually, piece by piece, she shared what she had. And the response confirmed what she already suspected. This wasn't small. This wasn't something that could be ignored. Together, they built a case. Not just accusations, but evidence. Documents that traced transactions, recordings that captured conversations, timelines that showed how everything fit together. It took weeks. Long nights, careful planning, constant second-guessing. Because one mistake could ruin everything. And Nyla understood that better than anyone. She had already been pushed out once. She wasn't going to let it happen again. By the time she walked back into Rexwell Dynamics, she was no longer the intern they had dismissed. She was prepared. Every step she took that morning was deliberate, every decision calculated. She knew exactly what she was about to do, and she knew the consequences that would follow. But she also knew something else. That the truth, once revealed, doesn't go back into hiding. When she entered that boardroom, she didn't hesitate. The same people who had once overlooked her now sat across from her, trying to understand how she had come back, how she had gotten this far. And then she placed the files on the table. One by one. Calm, steady, undeniable. There was no raised voice, no dramatic speech. Just facts. Clear, documented, impossible to dismiss. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted completely. What happened next unfolded quickly. Internal investigations, external inquiries, accounts frozen, leadership questioned. The structure that had taken years to build started to crack under the weight of its own actions. And at the center of it all was Nyla Vance, the intern no one had paid attention to, the one they thought they could remove without consequence. In the end, it wasn't just about exposing what Rexwell had done. It was about proving something deeper. That being overlooked doesn't make you powerless. That silence doesn't mean absence. And that sometimes, the person everyone ignores is the one who sees everything clearly. Because the truth doesn't belong to those who hide it. It belongs to those who are willing to face it, no matter the cost. If you have ever been treated unjust, or know someone who has, kindly comment, like, share and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. We will see you on the other one.